Hello, how do you do?
Hello. Hi!
Rubeish.
Yes, but we'll come to that later.
I beg your pardon?
It's disgraceful, of course. Utterly disgraceful.
What is?
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
Past and present mixed up.
But you do not understand me.
Let's get a few things straight.
What is the nature of the information you seek?
I'm afraid you're going to be awfully confused if you ask me to explain.
Refuse, and you die.
You offer a somewhat restricted choice.
What is your answer?
Here come the drums!
Iron Gron, 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 Iron Gron.
Greetings, human scum. You're very unwelcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing psychological operation to destroy your primitive Earth brains by taking you randomly through the televisual entertainment known, regrettably, as Doctor Who. My name is Commander Taylor of the 5th Sontaran Army Space Fleet.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and I'm really just here to persuade anyone wanting to do some violence that this podcast is not really strategically important to whatever war you may be fighting with a cosmic empire or a Time Lord or whatever. Yes. No, it's just a random podcast about Doctor Who, but nothing only about it. We do all of these. Anyway.
It is a primitive backwater marked by its superior random technology. And okay, I can't do the Sontaran voice forever. So I'm going to switch back to the Chris voice and tell you where this...
Whoa, Commander. What happened to you?
I have gone deep undercover as a human. I may even get a job as a butler later on, but that's for New Who. We are not in New Who at the moment, so I'm going to revert to the regular British voice. And what a British voice I have for you today.
Well, tell us about, in that delightfully British voice, where we might have been in our previous random journey on this podcast, because I'm having trouble remembering, to be honest with you.
Previously on BBC One, we were looking at some planets. The planets got a bit confusing because 3 stories ago we were on the planet of the spiders, which inexplicably was not called Spiridon, but in fact Metabilis 3. That may be a bit of a foreshadowing for today's story. 2 stories ago we did go to Spiridon, which is not the planet of the spiders, it's in fact the planet of the Daleks. A very, very confusing Cook's tour of planets.
Yeah, that would have been the Spiderion. Would have been the planet of the spiders.
Spiderion. Yeah. That would have helped the confusion and the invisibility.
Little on the nose if spiders were on Spiderion. But, we'll take it.
Well, that was written by Terry Nation, Planet of the Daleks. So, yeah, very on the nose is kind of his stock in trade there.
Yeah, speaking of on the nose, I'm a little late with my shirt choice here, I realize, but, we're going with it.
All right, well, the choice that the randomizer made after those confusing planets was to not take us to a planet, but to stick us in a confession dial for, if I didn't know better, 7,000 years, and then 12,000 years, and then maybe a few million, and then close to 1 billion, because it took us to Heaven Sent.
All right, yeah.
We were able to call in emergency backup with Elisa Stern, who had joined us for Day of the Doctor, but Heaven Sent was her favorite Doctor Who story ever. So we go back on to comment on that. That was fantastic.
Yeah, you might have called it a moment, but don't. But we do bring her out. She arrives. You don't bring her out. She just arrives when we do these epic Doctor Who adventures. Whenever maybe that'll be our tradition. If we do more in the top 10, it'll be an Elisa episode.
Yes, I love it. We will bring in the moment. And after we escaped the confession dial by bashing through a wall that was 400 times the strength of diamond, amazingly, we did it in 1 hour, perhaps a little more.
Perhaps a little more.
We broke through that wall and we found ourselves not on Gallifrey, but in the very first story to mention Gallifrey, literally just making that randomizer connection as I'm talking to you now, It is Season 11, Serial 1, the one that was broadcast just after Doctor Who's 10th birthday. It's the Time Warrior.
Boom. It is the Time Warrior. A lot of firsts in this episode. First of the new season. If you look at that season number, 11. It's two ones.
Yeah. Hey, how about that? Yeah, but, it's kind of weird that we had the three Doctors not at the 10th anniversary, and then the season 11 starts at the 10th anniversary. But you know what? You know who was in the audience for the Time Warrior, Pete? At the time in the UK?
Was it a Commander Taylor?
It was! It was! A young Sontaran shaped like a potato was there. And I know I was there at some point during these 7 weeks because for you visual followers of Pull to Open.
For those watching on YouTube and still confused by my shirt description, there's Spider-Man on it, by the way. Chris is holding up an iPad. I believe that's an iPad Pro and a nice iPad pencil. And I should probably stop describing the technology. And you have a photo of a gentleman, a bearded gentleman, who is holding both a cat and it looks like an infant. Who could that infant be?
A young Sontaran who is yet to rule his parents' lives. Had just started his assignment. It was not yet a month old. This picture was taken on December the 12th, 1973. Proudly wearing.
Wow, look at you.
Shirt.
Oh, wow.
And this is basically where I would have been for viewing of Doctor Who, because my dad was a Troughton and Pertwee fan. He watched those eras of the show. And what else would there have been to do with a baby at 5 o'clock? I mean, granted, I may have been napping through some of this story, but it is for sure that the first Doctor Who to go into my unfocused eyeballs. It had the time tunnel. It had Liz Sladen. I mean, I stood no chance. My future was laid out before me with the Time Warrior.
Wow. So we all kind of remember our first adventure when we first came on to this adventure. And this happens sometimes with companions. They think their first adventure with the Doctor is the one they remember.
Yeah.
But then, of course, something happens in a timey-wimey way, and we're all kind of Rose Tyler on New Year's Eve.
That's right.
And we knew it was just destiny because we actually had encountered the Doctor many months or years previous to our actual first encounter.
It's so wonderfully timey-wimey that this has happened to me, because this is actually my first time watching the Time Warrior with focused eyes.
Or non-infant eyes?
Non-infant eyes, yes. So I saw it. And you know how we sometimes make up memories in our head. You know, watching this, knowing that that's the background of it, it gave me such weird, like, deja vu vibes. That's it's fascinating. But we'll get there.
You'll definitely get there. I hope your eyes are well rested, because they're about to get a bit of a workout, and so will your ears as I enter with you the Whomoji Challenge, which is, of course, the part of the show where I get to describe emojis that represent the title of a Doctor Who story, and you, Commander Taylor, must. It is your mission. You are ordered to identify the Doctor Who story those emojis correspond to. If you do not, you will be needed. You'll have to take leave to the planet of the coffee shops.
Oh, no.
And you'll have to write an extensive report on its strategic weaknesses.
I'm sort of instinctively covering my probic vent right now, which you would think Sontarans would do. But yes.
You would, right? I guess it wouldn't be a vent then, though.
Okay, put me in your medieval torture chamber.
All right, we've had a number of these long Whomoji challenges recently. Many emojis. The last one, I think, was 36 emojis or something like that. So, in the interest of mixing things up a bit, do you remember recently we asked for some single emojis?
We did. Ooh, have we got a single emoji?
We have a few single emoji titles.
Wow.
So, I'm going to give you one.
Well, be sure to post it in the chat afterwards, because clearly I'm going to need to see that emoji over and over. But yes.
All right. So here we go. This actually comes to us from an unusual spot. It is actually from TikTok, where one of our audience there, Anurin, I believe is the name, gave us a few of these. And here goes. I'm going to tee this up, and I'm going to take a long time teeing it up because it's just one emoji. I'm not going to have a lot of time to actually describe the emojis. All right. Are you breathing okay?
I am. Perhaps you should have the emoji sort of coming into focus. You make my infant eyes there as they start to appear.
Maybe. Okay, well, as long as you're rested. Are you rested?
I'm rested and ready.
All right. Did you consult the emoji Wikipedia before this?
Is it a new emoji?
It is not. As I said, it is one emoji, and here it is. The human ear. Dropping that in the chat.
Could it possibly be the Capaldi episode Listen?
It's Listen! All right, so there we go. That's the Whomoji challenge.
Thank you for the easy one, Aaron.
Yeah, except there's 5 more, so we're going to do them all now. No, kidding. We're going to save all these for future podcast episodes. Thank you, Anurin. He also gave us a couple of others that were not single emojis, so we're well stocked, and we obviously have a few more from before. However, we may have to sort of combine a few of these single ones, just kind of like to just to pad the segment, really. But we won't do that this week, because we're all about moving things fast.
Single emoji titles are no match for my superior Sontaran brain.
Clearly. Remember, you too can contribute a Whomoji. You, of course, can ping us on any of our networks. Listen for those in a few minutes. But the absolute best way to leave a Whomoji is through a review. So if you review Pull to Open in your podcast app, the Apple podcast app is probably the best place for this. You can leave your Whomoji as either the title or the body of your review. Either way, we will see it. And even though, yes, you can submit Whomojis through other means, we will prioritize the ones that are put in review. So if you put it in a review, you will go to the front of the line. All right.
Fabulous. And then there's something else you can do. Don't just leave us a review if you're on Spotify. Pull from the bottom of the screen. That's right. It's Poll to Open. Every week you can give a rating to the story we're talking about if you want to. Right now, literally as we're talking, there's nothing to stop you. There are no rules. There are no puny humans to hold you back from rating The Time Warrior right now if you want to, but you might want to wait till the end of the episode. And for those people who did vote in the poll to open on Planet of Spiders, we've got some results now. Now, just to give you a reminder, I said that this one was a Lady Cassandra, because I thought it looked very lovely. But the paper-thin plot didn't make any sense. We'll explain that in the other ratings at the end of the show, if you're new around here. You gave it a hybrid rating.
Yeah.
Professor Hater, meaning they must have learned something from this, and it's not all that great. And a Zarbi, which is so good, so bad it's good. Not so good.
Yeah, I was probably a little hard on it. I mean, because, it is too long, like all the episodes of the era. Maybe I was a little over-indexing on that. But honestly, there was that sort of stuff towards the end of the nameless, faceless colonists that just more annoyed me than anything.
Well, I hate to say it, Pete, but, first of all, as listeners, listeners understand elections because you are probably listening to this after the US elections. In which case, hello to you in a post-apocalyptic hellscape. Hope everything's well.
We are blissfully oblivious to this.
Oblivious to the results. But I tell you what we are not oblivious to, the fact that we've been voted out of office.
That's true.
Because the listeners overwhelmingly voted Planet of Spiders, not any of our ratings, but a Dalek, meaning a solid, good episode of Doctor Who. The equal second place, actually, for 3 ratings, the Hater, the Fixed Point in Time, and the Viscount Banger.
Yeah.
People who thought Planet of Spiders was a Viscount banger. And that might be a good segue to talk about some comments from one of our most devoted listeners.
Absolutely. So, yeah, very interesting result. The listeners have spoken. They really, really like Planet of Spiders. And one listener in particular, our chum over at the Doctor Who show, Dave Kitchen, he went out of his way to send us personally some comments. And I'll just read some of them here. So he thought our commentary on Planet of the Spiders was great. He didn't agree with our takes. He was very clear about that. He says it's one of the most interesting examples of doing the series in random order versus broadcast order.
I agree about that.
Contends that it's a perfect, or a very good anyway, wrap-up of the Pertwee Letts era. Actually he uses an adjective. It's brilliant. It wraps up the themes, character arcs, references to the past, stuff with actors and production crew from the era, even ends with the final "while there's life, there's hope" moment. And if you watch in random order, he suggests that a lot of that might not matter. But he said he saw this when he was 6. He loved The Chase, then The Comedy Policeman. He has a couple of other quick notes on some of the things we said in the episode. But what did you think of his overall reaction?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely right, and I think it's fascinating to have that corrective as we go on our random journey. It's great to have people who are so familiar with the show in non-random order to kind of look at the way that we're looking at it and say, well, that's interesting. Because, part of our goal here is to really examine each story on its own merits. And it's so hard to do if you're watching Doctor Who the traditional, non-timey-wimey way of being in straight-up chronological order. We're not. So I think we can point out that you're not going to have your Pertwee era nostalgia if you're just watching this, because you just plucked it out of thin air as Random.org does. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think it made me think a little bit about some of the broader comments we make sometimes. And one of the things I mentioned about Planet of the Spiders is that it's probably not something you'd come back to again and again. And I think that's true, but I will sort of caveat that doesn't mean it's not good. There are a lot of things that don't really stand up to repeated viewing, but that you really liked at the time and are still really good pieces of entertainment or literature. And so I'll hold as an example in sci-fi genre is Lost, which I think, like a lot of people, was sort of riveted to while it was on, but it's not something I'm like, oh yeah, this episode a lot. It's telling sort of a different kind of story, and when you have like arcs like that, which I think what Dave is sort of alluding to here, it's like going back to them isn't really something you can sort of check in and out of like a lot of episodic television, and I think that's fair, and I think that's a good recalibration when you sort of think about sort of criticisms and things you might say about certain episodes, that a repeatability, while can be a desired thing, isn't necessarily a litmus test.
Yes, and he also has, Dave has some wonderful further comments to several things that we said. We did wonder whether Doris, the Brigadier's love interest, mentioned for I think only for the first time in Planet of Spiders, is not Kate's mother. He had a first wife. It's in the Virgin books. Also in the Virgin books is what we were talking about, was the Mike Yates finding himself and discovering his identity as a gay man. That had him with the Virgin books. Also had him with Tommy. Tommy, can you hear me?
There you go.
Planet of Spiders. So yes, and also for those of you who remember me talking about the lady in the cabaret at the start, Dave believes that it was not ping pong balls, just belly dancing. Which
I gotta like side with Dave on this one. I don't know what shows you've been to, Chris.
Well, right.
That was it never occurred to me.
Right in and tell us, what do you think the Brig and the Doctor were watching in the cabaret, whether it was in fact PG-13. And you can tell us on any of the places you can find us online, which of course include YouTube, which is a great place to like and subscribe if you're doing that right now. You can also become a true companion of the podcast on YouTube.
Just a small pledge per month that'll help you support the show and make sure we can keep it coming. You can also pledge at the Viscount level if you ever want to join us on a podcast. And hey, those of you kind of like one-time donations, there's always the super thanks. There should be somewhere, some button below this video. Of course, there's also Patreon. That's pull to patreon.com/pull to open. And if there is a way you can also donate directly through Spotify if you'd like to do that.
That's right. But why would you do these things, you ask? Well, because we provide you with quality entertainment and quality torture. And having easily escaped your primitive torture chamber, Commander Patch Owl, I will now put you in the torture chamber in your turn.
Okay.
It is time for that advanced section that we know as TLDW. Too long didn't watch, or Too Long Doctor Who. In which we summarize the story that we're about to talk about in record time. We allot 30 seconds per classic series episode. For the Time Warrior, which mercifully 4 episodes, not like the rest of the stories in Series 11. It's just 4 episodes. So, Pete, you have 2 minutes.
That's right.
To summarize the entirety of Robert Holmes's Time Warrior.
I know I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, it's quite a weight to have on my shoulders, but I am designed for load bearing. So I'm pretty confident I'm going to be able to stumble through this with this TLDW on my back. There's like a lot of Doctor Who episodes of the era. There's a lot of sort of back and forth among the same sets in the middle. And there's always a place you can get lost. My tactic there is going to be have them fight it out. And I'll just stand back and watch.
No more prevarication, sir. I feel like you are prevaricating so that someone will come behind me and hit me in the back, hit me in my pelvic vent. I'm not going to fall for it. The official pull to open summary of the Time Warrior in 2 minutes begins. The countdown begins in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so it's medieval times, and this thing crashes at night, and it's by this castle, and the guy goes out to check it out. It turns out it's a Sontaran spaceship. A Sontaran comes out, claims the planet, and befriends, essentially, the warlord there. Cut to the 20th century, and the Doctor is helping UNIT investigate why all these scientists are disappearing from this place. They're keeping a close eye on them. This young woman, who says her name is Lavina Smith, is there to help out as a virologist. Turns out she's Sarah Jane Smith. She's a journalist and has been hearing about these disappearances too and wants to investigate. What they find out is that these people are being transported back in time. The Doctor traces one. He takes the TARDIS, but Sarah stows away. They go back to where this medieval castle is, and the Sontaran has befriended sort of more like a co-belligerent alliance with this bad guy, this guy named Iron Gron and his thugs, his chief lieutenant's Blood Axe. And they're basically warlords here on this part of the England, and but the Lynx has been helping them. That's the name of the Sontaran, and he's been giving them weapons while they help him repair his ship. So there's this other castle where a guy named Sir Edward doesn't like Iron Gron, but doesn't have enough troops. So the Doctor ends up helping him and trying to resist Iron Gron and possibly take back the castle. And so the Doctor with Sarah figures out how to get the scientists back to Earth, back to the future, and basically does a lot of back and forth with Lynx. Figures out he's a Sontaran. Lynx is trying to give him a robot. The Doctor impersonates the robot for a bit, and then there's a lot of danger and back and forth. But the Doctor eventually grabs a chandelier, swings over everybody, and the Lynx, his weakness is the probic bend at the back of his neck, and this guy shoots an arrow into it just as he's about to take off the ship. The ship takes off, blows up the castle of Iron Gron. Sir Edward thanks the Doctor, and the Doctor takes Sarah back with him to Unit HQ in the future.
Time, sir! Congratulations, Commander! You escaped the torture chamber just in time, before the great explosion.
I had to pull the ripcord there in the middle, because it happened exactly as I thought, which is that I thought I was doing pretty well on the first couple of episodes, and I was trying to feel confident in describing the back and forth. And then I just stopped. I just no. Then I just cut to the end. There's a chandelier, and then blah blah blah, because it was like all the stuff with the fireworks and Iron Gron's rifles and the dummies, all of that. Although entertaining, is just rabbit holes. It's just rabbit holes to go down for a TLDW.
There were so many TLDW rabbit holes you could have fallen into. I mean, you could, like me, be so enamored of the time tunnel effect that you just go straight into that. There's this guy, and he looks like he has a sheep on his head, and he fades backwards into...
wow, the sheep on the head. Oh, that's a new one.
Love you, John.
The Longshanks-looking guy with a sheep on his head and a grand nose, I guess.
That's right, and the guy with the sheep on his head meets the guy who looks like a potato. And thus you have
that's intentional.
A wonderful stew of lamb and potatoes in this. By the way, starting with the time tunnel, did you know, I was today years old when I learned that effect was a camera looking at a polythene bag.
Oh, interesting.
Which is so wonderfully sort of cheap and Doctor Who-ish in terms of the effects. And I think that is kind of what you see throughout here is Doctor Who making very good use of his extremely limited budget by... So much of this script is geared towards making this kind of epic story with just a very small number of speaking parts and small number of actors and a small number of sets, right?
For sure. I mean, old Doctor Who was all about where to focus, right? The ambition was always exceeding its grasp, and that was just kind of a given. But by paying attention to certain things and making sure those looked good, or at least sort of got your imagination going, and making those like really the focus, you kind of overlook a lot of the dross, the stuff that is kind of in the background and the shaky sets and whatever else. Great example here. The first scene, I think, really wins you over in that it's this medieval castle. You have these over-the-top performances by the guy who's doing Iron Gron and Blood Axe. Can
I just say, by the way, I'm just to let you know for the rest of the show, if you say something I disagree with, I'm going to go, what? In full Iron Gron style, because he does that all the time. Right? Anyway.
He's loud, that guy. They definitely were like, increase the volume. That was all the direction he got. But no, but what I was going to get to was the bit where Lynx comes out of his ship, and he has this whole thing, I claim this for the Sontaran Empire, and he has this sad little flag that sort of comes out, but it's actually not sad. It's actually kind of neat, and has the two flags come out, and it's like, it's kind of like, this is real world building here. This is what I would say. Like, Robert Holmes wrote this script, who's a veteran Doctor Who writer at this point, and he really meets the challenge. Like, he does so much world building in the Time Warrior. Like, that, just from that first scene, you're just like, oh, wow, like something's happening in medieval times and this alien's here. This is interesting. I like this.
Yeah, and Lynx is kind of a pathetic figure in some ways, as this solo Sontaran, as you point out. And this is something, I mean, if there's one thing we learn as writers from Bob Holmes, it is, do not be worried if you are just simply repeating the same story, because you can still find genius in it, right? I mean, the idea of single alien figure from the future trapped in the past of Earth is something he'd revisit with the Talons of Wen-Chiang.
And Douglas Adams would revisit in City of Death.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's classic Doctor Who stuff. Bob Holmes, we should mention, by the way, he's coming off Carnival of Monsters here. That was his previous one. So again, another one where it's like, it's the past of Earth, or is it like it's the past with a twist? So
he's riding high, man.
He's riding high, and he is definitely not above just sort of having a lot of fun with it.
Totally.
And here's the thing. The first thing I want to say about the Time Warrior is what surprised me about it was how new Who-ish it is. And I also happened to read recently that Stephen Moffat says that he's always just trying to write like Robert Holmes.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense after you see this, because we not only have the very first sort of very Moffat-y line about pointing out that the Doctor tends to chase after young girls. right? Tends to have young female companions, and you have Professor Rubeish. Did you mention the name of Professor Rubeish?
Oh, Mr. Rubeish, yeah.
Professor
The gag.
Rubeish, the gag of where he just sticks his hand out and says Rubeish, and that's what passes for humor in 1973 Britain.
It's not bad. My daughter liked that gag, and I don't hate it. I mean, it's like Rubeish, and it is one of those gags. It's like it inherently gets older every time they do it. So thankfully, they only do it a few times. But yeah.
So Rubeish points out that the Doctor seems a bit old to be going after that young girl.
Yeah.
Also, the Sontaran, like, this is the first real kind of mention of sex and reproduction in Doctor Who, because the Sontaran tells Iron-Gron, "Oh, I see, a primary and secondary reproductive system. It is inefficient. You should change it."
Right.
That's so good. And so
it's good,
right?
Exactly. You definitely imagine Dan Starkey saying that line as whatever, I forget his character recurring. He's done all the Sontarans, I think, in New Who, but it's very much like the humor built into the Sontarans, which they have leaned into a lot in New Who, particularly through Strax, that's his name.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is here. It's definitely here. This is a very knowing script. There's very much a wink. Often when you look at lines that like Iron-Gron has and how he interacts with Blood Axe and everyone else, I gotta say I really, really like the villains in this one because you have they're very different. You know, you have Lynx, who is the Sontaran. He's cold, and you know, like you said, like once you peel back what he's doing, it's he's just kind of this sad, solitary warrior who's only trying to repair his ship and all this sort of. Yeah, and all this stuff. I really like this. I really like that he's just stirring up trouble for kicks as a pastime. He's just like, yeah, I'll give this guy some guns, and it'll be fun to watch him fight. And then once that doesn't work, he just kind of gets bored with it and leaves and doesn't care about anything. But then you have Iron-Gron, and he's just loud, and he's just this loutish, simple bad guy, like this warlord. And
what
I like that.
Sorry.
Because the Doctor, honestly, there's a lot of focus in Doctor Who of Davros-like villains and these diabolical geniuses, and that's all good. Those are very good episodes, but I like seeing him pitted against someone who just wants to fight, someone who's like, Absalom Dack or something, right? Like, I love that contrast of style, and it really comes out in particularly the last couple of episodes where the Doctor's like captured when he's impersonating the robot, which I didn't quite get to in the
Ben's forgotten that bit, really.
Yeah. Well, there's some, but I like that the Iron-Gron is just using it for target practice. He doesn't have the diabolical means. He's not trying to like duplicate him and invade Gallifrey. He's just goofing around. And I'll say this. Iron-Gron comes closer than almost all villains in Doctor Who to killing the Doctor. Like the Doctor is at his mercy. Like he's holding him down, and Iron-Gron's I think he's about to split his head with a battle axe or something. And he just decides not to, I think, at some point, or he because Lynx walks in with the rifles or something.
Yes, the Doctor keeps being saved. He's saved by Hal. At one point, Hal, we should mention, played by Jeremy Bulloch, who'd gone to be Boba Fett, and who I utterly neglected to ask about the Time Warrior when I interviewed him. I'm sad about that now. But yes, he's Iron-Gron. Not only does he look a lot like Ron Livingston in a beard, not only is he just having so much fun chewing up the scenery. With what? And,
pouring wine all over it,
and I mean, it's just such wonderful cod Shakespearean stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like this is how the Doctor might end his life if he weren't, a bit more savvy. It could easily end something like this with a primitive man standing above him with an axe that could, regenerate him early, I guess.
Yeah, you think he would have thought of something better than what he ends up doing in that scene. First of all, I'm sad they didn't put some kind of balaclava or something over his neck, over Pertwee's neck, because it's so obvious there's a guy under there just from the look of the scene. Speaking of paying attention to details, they could have fixed that pretty easily. But when Iron Gron, and it's so funny how Iron Gron just wants to wreck the thing. Like, he's such a bully. He just wants to wreck his toy. He has a toy and he's going to have fun with it until he can break it. He doesn't even care about using it against Sir Edward.
Who breaks his toy on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
That's what Iron Gron is. And he does play it with, he's clearly having fun with it. I would have loved to see Bob Hoskins as Iron Gron, because Bob Hoskins, before he was famous, was the first choice, and he couldn't do it because he had a scheduling conflict. But my goodness. Yeah. I'm not sure that even he could have had as much fun as David Deeker does here with all that. What? And it's what's interesting about all this COD medieval dialogue, and we'll get into the history corner in a second. There's not really much of a history corner here because it's not very clear where it is, and I have nothing to say about that. But it's marvelous sort of COD Shakespearean stuff that Robert Holmes is clearly having fun with. Now, you cannot, as a British person, watch The Time Warrior today without thinking of Blackadder.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen Blackadder, but you will know that there is a phrase about having a cunning plan. And not only do they use the word cunning 3 times in the Time Warrior, but also Bloodaxe says to Iron Gron, Bloodaxe is basically Iron Gron's Baldric. And he said, "Oh, 'tis a cunning plan, Captain." So you're really just like, it's so obviously over the top here in a very new Who-ish way, in an almost sort of, Robot of Sherwood kind of way, right? You wouldn't be surprised to learn that this isn't even actual medieval England, and it's just some medieval theme park, like Sarah suggests.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mention that, because my daughter loved that it was a medieval setting. Like, she kept saying that was the thing she liked best about it. And that, she really liked, she said, I wish they'd do more episodes in this time. Mm-hmm. And because we'd already done it for the podcast, I thought, like, hey, why don't you watch Robot of Sherwood then? And then she sort of watched this right after we'd finished the Time Warrior. So it's funny, like, to make that connection of that one's the immediate go-to as opposed to something maybe a little more gritty, right? Let's just have a romp in medieval times, which is clearly what they're trying to do here. Yeah. And then Bloodaxe in particular, it's funny, like, how he is, I think they're both pretty standout performances. And like, Bloodaxe might even have some of the better lines of, like, Iron Gron's like, what does this say? It's like, I can't read, Captain. I just love that line. Like, we're dumb bullies and the bad guy side. What do you expect?
Yeah, and the dumb bullies who just all fall asleep at a convenient point when Sarah puts her powder in the stew, and they all just fall asleep at the same time. But then Iron Gron is not as sleepy as the rest, and he wakes up to discover that all stores are being stolen by Hal, who's being pretty noisy about it. To be clear,
that's true.
He's not really tiptoeing around the folks with the swords there.
Yeah, he's just tossing them, clang.
Yes, but also, I mean, it may be the greatest piece of COD dialogue where Iron Gron just says, "Oh, beshrew me, but I grow fond of this fellow." Beshrew, which there's literally a line in Blackadder where Blackadder says, "Oh, Percy, only actors say beshrew me." And so, yeah, the tomfoolery of the Middle Ages here is interesting. But also, it creates that kind of interesting contrast with the part that hasn't necessarily aged that well, which is the women's lib stuff, as it were. And that might be a good time to pivot to the introduction of the greatest Doctor Who companion ever, Miss Sarah Jane Smith.
Oh, I thought we were going to pivot to the history corner, but yes, it's kind of the history corner. But no, I totally agree. Like, I was going to ask you, like, what you thought of her introduction, and I think it's quite good in the sense of giving her a character that is distinct from Jo and has kind of a way about her, and certainly that way developed into the character we know and love. But like you say, I think those are the parts that I wouldn't necessarily say they haven't aged well in the way we usually use that term, but they're clumsy, right? They're very ham-fisted. They really sort of cake on this women's lib angle of Sarah. You definitely get that right out of the gate. And it's kind of fun. I do think that she is confused or fooled by the theme park aspect of this a little too long. That said, that's
she's just been in the TARDIS.
Yeah, and that's kind of what this used to be. I mean, it's hard to sort of rewind 50 years and think about like what science fiction used to be. And, this you kind of had to do this. Like, oh my God, there's zombies? What? Tell me about like what the dead are coming to life? And you have to remember, like, culture wasn't like sci-fi had not taken over at all, right? Like, it was a very niche genre in the 70s. So this idea that it's just sort of cultural literacy now to sort of accept, oh, of course, like if you want a pivot point in that continuum of the 70s to today, it's probably Scream, where basically entertainment got very self-aware, and then being in a world where these kinds of shows and movies are made is now part of that setting. So you kind of have to sort of put that hat on to really sort of buy into that. But it is like, if you're here in 2024 watching it, it's like, yes, of course you freaking time traveled. Come on.
Yeah. And Sarah is, I mean, the backstory of Sarah is that, she was sort of the anti-Jo Grant, as it were. Jo Grant has just left in the Green Death. And Sarah's the new companion, and there were a lot of complaints that Jo Grant was a bit too, that they dumbed it down a little bit too much.
Right.
And so Sarah Jane Smith was supposed to be the opposite of that. And she is. She refuses to make coffee, which is great. Good for her, and kind of a meta commentary on Doctor Who. The companions would never do such a thing again. The Doctor goes off to make coffee on his own, which is bringing me to my coffee theory that the Doctor, one of the things that the many Clara splinters are doing throughout history is preventing the Doctor from getting hooked on coffee. As she refuses to make it, he goes into the TARDIS to make it himself. I don't think he actually makes it, or doesn't make very good coffee, or makes decaf, because then he goes to sleep in the next scene. But yes, Liz Sladen is unfortunately saddled. And I will say, first of all, connection to me, having just been born in Liverpool, Liz Sladen, also from Liverpool. Yay! And her accent accidentally came out in the early rehearsals, which she was a bit embarrassed by. But she's playing Sarah Jane Smith as a southern, gritty southern journalist.
South Croydon.
And she says what subservient poppycock to Meg, the serving woman in the kitchen, who says we're all slaves. You're still living in the Middle Ages. Now, I love Liz Sladen for many reasons, but also the fact that she was able to sell that clunker of a line,
right,
is so good. But I also love, my favorite Sarah line in all of this is, I could murder a cup of tea, when she's sort of trying to grok what the Doctor's talking about like galactic ticket inspector. He talks about Time Lords as galactic ticket inspectors. She's like, "You're serious? I could murder a cup of tea." I
like the thing I like most about it is that Robert Holmes really used the new person introduction to the Max and has a period where she doesn't trust the Doctor, and this is not that from him. Yeah. Well, that was the cool thing. It's very jarring when that scene happens, because we are so used to the structure of the show of when the Doctor and the companion get together and they work together and, they're friends, etc. Right? There's when they're separated and they're in danger, when they get back together, you kind of, okay, now it's okay. But that happens, and then she runs away, and like, and then you're kind of reminded about, oh yeah, she's new, she doesn't know him. And then she ends up sort of saving/capturing him later.
If this was New Who, the bit where she runs away from him would be followed by the Doctor saying, "That's odd. Usually they run in the same direction as me."
Right. So anyway, like, I'm glad they used that. Obviously, they don't go very far with it. They get together at Sir Edward's place, and then they all kind of make nice, and the Doctor does the fireworks thing, which is fun. I think it's really fun, because when, like, Iron Gron comes in and he sees everyone in the battlements or all the dummies that they've put up, which is very. It's like I was reminded of the Three Amigos, which I hadn't thought of the last time I seen this. You know, all the people who, you know, with weird hats or whatever. So anyway, it's cool that they see through it immediately. And again, like I think Lynx is great. He's like, "Why are you waiting? What are you going to do? Like, what's the attack going to be? Let's do this. Let's totally take the castle." And he's like, "We're going to run away."
You kind of want Lynx to turn around and say, "You fools! Have you not seen the Seven Samurai? This is a very traditional plot of the villagers defending against the bandits. Come on! Of course they're going to put straw people up there." But that is a wonderful scene of sort of like the cheapness of this, like the fact that there are barely even enough extras to climb up those ladders. Like it's almost a meta commentary on Who itself that they have, you know, straw people up in the battlements because they couldn't afford enough extras because everyone's conveniently away at the war.
Yeah, there's some moments that I really like in this. I do like that, again, the world building of it. He really wants to establish that the Sontarans are not just some new monster that the Doctor is encountering. Like, who is this? What's that? They very deliberately have the Doctor have this face of recognition when Lynx takes off his helmet. And that's supposed to be meant to be some kind of reveal. It is, like, in hindsight, a bit silly that it's obviously a Sontaran. You don't need the helmet off, you know, like if you're at all familiar with them. So, but it also suggests the Doctor had some kind of off-screen adventure or is just somehow familiar with Sontarans prior to this. Now, you could argue that was the two Doctors.
I was going to say, yes.
Right.
He remembers from Troughton, from being Troughton, but then usually...
But then you get into the whole thing of when did the two Doctors happen from the perspective of the second Doctor. And we've talked about that already and whether season 6B you need it or not. But I actually, you know, obviously the two Doctors hadn't been made when they made this. I think what they were simply trying to do is this. The Doctor's pretty, you know, worldly, or rather universally, whatever it is, in that he knows like the major players at this point. He's just encountered these guys, and maybe it's new for us, the audience. It's not new for him. And, you know, they talk about the war with the Rutans and, you know, the many galaxies is conquered. And again, they used a lot of different terminology at the time, whether they meant galaxies or what, you know, star systems or what have you. But the whole point was like, we're going to do this kind of like established cosmic race and that is aware of the Time Lords. And the cool little back and forth that they have when he talks about like, where are you from? And he says, for the first time in the whole series, just without blinking, there's no zoom in or whatever. He just says Gallifrey.
I love the idea of a zoom in as he said the word Gallifrey.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I like that it's casual, right? He's just talking to someone who's sort of cosmic aware, and it's meaningful. Because if you say that to the Brigadier or Sarah or whoever, yeah, I'm from this planet Gallifrey, they're just going to shrug and go like, yeah, whatever. It's some planet, some place. But he talks to someone who is, you know, been around the galaxy. It's like, oh, Gallifrey, right. Time Lords. I know you guys.
Yeah.
Like, that was cool.
Gallifrey, as Holmes had it in the original script. But yeah, that's definitely a sign that they are very much in the, you know, writing canon on the back of a napkin stage of Doctor Who. Here. You could argue that they never got out of that stage, but we're certainly,
as is only proper.
We're certainly in it here. Yeah, Holmes's joke about the Sontarans looking like their heads the exact same shape as the helmet is like that. That's Douglas Adams-esque stuff. Also, Douglas Adams-esque is the way that Holmes pitched the story of this. And he was originally thinking, by the way, of the Japanese soldiers who didn't surrender at the end of World War II. He's also thinking of Vietnam, as I'll mention in a second. But he wrote it as a report from Sontaran commander Holmes to Terence C. Dix, who was the Sontaran commander Terran C. Dix.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
sounds like a juvenile joke.
Yeah, right. But you know, he writes it, and the way that he writes that original story treatment is very clearly influenced by Vietnam, which was going on at the time, because the Sontaran officer, who is, you know, turns out to be posthumous recommendation of Lynx for a medal of something or other. But
Gotcha.
Sontaran officer calls the Earth people gooks, which is clearly a Vietnam reference. So it's Holmes is getting very very satirical here. As with Carnival of Monsters, like there's a lot of depth to what he's saying. In this case about war and the way it's conducted, I think it's sort of certainly more humorous and definitely more effective than the kind of the anti-war nature of Planet of the Daleks, which we just went to.
Yeah,
have a few speeches and that sort of tackles the Vietnamness of it all.
One thing I'll say about this story, though, is that there's only a few things that work the first time, there's a few things they repeat that don't work so well the second. So, for example, like the fights that they have in Iron Gron's courtyard, which they do the sort of shot from above, it's stunt doubles, doing whatever. And the first time it happens, like my daughter and I, we just were laughing out loud because, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it was just goofy looking playground antics.
It looks like the kind of shot you get in Benny Hill. Right.
Yeah, totally.
It's like shot from above. You really need the yakety sax in the background because they're just doing this choreographed run around the courtyard. It's like, oh, I'm going to escape you here. I'm going to duck you here. I'm going to jump over there. I'm going to fall on these haystacks here. Like,
and there's going to be at one point he sort of like swings a halberd or something. I don't know what it is. It might even just be a bucket. I forget. It's just like so goofy looking. And they do that a couple of times. Like the first time, it's like, okay, I get what you're doing, and it's goofy and it's funny. And then the second time, was it funny? Was this supposed to be a stunt sequence? Do we really need to do this again? And then that sort of happens throughout. There's a few back and forths and sets that obviously it's a Doctor Who show. They're going to reuse the sets. But I would say as a story, this kind of peters out by halfway through episode 4, even earlier, right? Because we're sort of, it's just the same thing. We're back in Iron Gron's clutches and we're either captured or we're not. There's the whole thing with Sir Edward. And is he ever going to do anything? Spoiler, no. Yes. He just kind of sits there in his castle and whines about how he doesn't have anyone except for Hal, I guess. So, nothing, it just kind of like runs out of steam. And you get the sense that even Lynx is bored with it. Like, he's like, okay, I'm done with this guy yelling at me and my robot's not working and whatever else. And I'm just going to go. And blow up everything when I go.
He keeps announcing that he's going to go. And I'm getting real sort of, toxic marriage vibes from him and Iron Gron because he just, Lynx basically keeps walking in saying, you're so rubbish. I'm leaving you. I'm going out. And he's like, I have not give you leave. And he's like, I'm just walking out of here. I'm going to be so many light years away from you. And doesn't quite do it. Like there's something still connecting him and Iron Gron. They have unfinished business there between them. A lot of time.
Yeah. He's like someone who's like dissed too much in an internet chat group or something, right? Like I'm leaving now, and makes these big long posts, and I've got a long 3-page long thing of why this sucks and you guys are lame and I'm leaving. And so it's all that.
Everyone's else like, what?
Yeah, I did like the target practice thing, but it goes on too long. Like there's so many shots, and the way the set is, it's just not credible that he's dodging them all with that many people. It's like, all right, I guess I'll go with it for the story, but he kind of really needed to be rescued sooner than that. But I will say the chandelier thing is great for the time. Like that is a nice stunt.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it was shortly, I believe, after the filming of this that they discovered that Roger Delgado had died, and that was sort of, kind of a turning point for Pertwee, right? He didn't feel very good about the show after that. But here, he's in, as you might say, he's in fine fettle. Beshrew me even, but he is in fine fettle. He looks so happy as he's tossing those stink bombs over his shoulder. And he looks happy to be able to do, even though that wasn't him, to be able to look like he's doing a classic, Errol Flynn kind of chandelier stunt, right? I mean,
totally.
It seems like, Pertwee was checking off his list, his bucket list for Doctor Who, and that was on it, right? Got to swing away on a chandelier at some point.
Nice. Well, he also got in. He was also very happy when he got a chance to drink a little wine.
He did.
and
Yes.
said, well,
Other
I don't know if it really
question-
was. Yeah.
The question about the Doctor Who and beverages, which we've talked about throughout Baltoven history, is the Doctor actually an alcoholic who was on the wagon in his Hartnell incarnation, except when he slipped up and had some mead? And you know, Pertwee we've seen before in Day of the Daleks.
Day of the Daleks.
He becomes a bit of a neophile.
Absolutely. He loves his wine. So if he was on the wagon, he is definitely off it for his third incarnation.
Well, he definitely says this thing here where he's like, oh, no more wine. Oh, perhaps. Oh, I'll just go on. Have it on. Just one more. Just to wet the
Fill
whistle.
up my mug. I'll just have to concentrate a little more when I make the fireworks. It's all good. Yeah.
He also, so yes, definitely Pertwee's incarnation is a wine drinker. I don't think we ever see him drinking anything else. But he also, in that scene, there's that wonderful moment that will lead us straight into the history corner, where he throws a chicken leg over his shoulder because he's copying Iron right? Now, it's like, oh, well, when in Rome, you know, tosses his chicken leg. Now, that is a wonderful meta joke because the classic thing that we always associate with, like, you know, medieval feasts of like, oh, just toss the bone over the shoulder, and that's what the king always does. That didn't happen at the time. You didn't do. No one's ever talked about that. That came from Charles Lawton playing Henry VIII in early silent films, I believe it was.
Oh, okay. I always thought it came from Rocket Robin Hood, where they showed Friar Tuck as the animated version, just taking one bite of something and throwing it over his shoulder like it's the most silly, exaggerated thing. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. But I was always like, these wasted a lot of food. Like, you should take at least 2 bites out of that chicken leg before you throw it over your shoulder, dude.
So, speaking of all the COD medieval stuff here, let's see if we can pin down the dating controversy of the Time Warrior. By the way, did you know that in the original script, Liz Sladen, that Sarah Jane was supposed to say that she was from 1974, which really would have sorted us out.
That would have clarified so many things.
Right? But what?
It's kind of where we landed anyway. But anyway, yeah.
That is where we landed. But so when is this set? Because it is very confusing.
1293. Or is it 1273?
1273.
Something like that.
Sarah says the 13th century. Iron Gron at one point talks about Norman scribbles, which suggests that there's still this division between the Normans and the Anglo-Saxons, which was after the conquest of 1066, so a little bit later. But if it's set during King John's reign, which was the original Robert Holmes' intention, then I believe that was earlier.
Probably, yeah. It would have been 12th century or early 13th century, I want to say.
12th century, I believe. But also, by the way, the Doctor would have to take care to not run into himself around King John or Robot.
Yeah.
Take it all the way back to the King's demons.
Yeah, don't trip over Magna Carta. Yeah, I mean, I think the, what's the book I'm thinking of? The A History books put it in the 13th century, the late 13th century. So that's kind of what I'm going off of.
King John died in 1216. So if those are the wars that we're supposed to be talking about, like the Crusades, you know.
Yeah, they mentioned the Interminable Wars. Right,
which a lot of people have said, well, that's sort of obviously supposed to refer to the Crusades, which especially in the UK at the time, school kids were taught a lot about that era. So you would just automatically think of this time as being the Crusades.
Well, I gotta say, I like that it's vague. If you don't need to pin it down, that's fine. And I think from what I read, Terrence Dix basically challenged him to do something in medieval times. And Holmes was like, okay, this is kind of lame because it's like what they used to do with historical figures, and those are always boring. And so he said, I'm going to do it if I don't have to have any historical figures in it. And so he made it sort of like this generic countryside warlord with a castle. And I like that. That's good. And then we can sort of like, drag and drop it sort of wherever we want in a couple of centuries around this time. So I'm like, if anything, it's like a good takeaway for writers, like do your best to kind of be whatever you want it to be. Let us interpret it.
Yeah, you kind of wouldn't be surprised if they kind of pulled away at the end to reveal that this all been set in some kind of Westworld kind of,
Yeah.
Bob Turn Sticks challenged Bob Holmes to do something set in medieval times, and Bob Holmes said, "The restaurant? I gotcha." Basically, that's the result here.
I don't think we successfully answered the question of where this is in history, but there are some other questions that we need to answer, and those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. Someone was playing a deep lute there. Why did the randomizer take us here? That's the first question.
Well, it is coming up to, and it will be more coming up to when you're listening to this, dear listener and dear viewer, to Doctor Who's birthday.
Oh, that's right.
And to mine. And this was the story that was closest to the Doctor's 10th birthday and to my birthday. So it's time to celebrate that. The Gallifrey connection, which I mentioned at the top of the show.
True.
Which is fantastic. I love that idea. But also, you have that point where Sarah has to drop the sleeping potion into both the stew and the oatmeal for the guards and the staff. And to do so, she distracts the serving girl who's mixing the oatmeal by pointing and saying, "Look at that great spider."
Oh, yeah.
Is obviously not intended, but also given the reference to Metebelis 3 here, it's just a wonderful bookending between the first Sarah and Third Doctor story and the last that we've been to very recently.
Spiders are creepy. There's a lot of creepiness. My whole connection was what you just said, the Metebelis 3, which is that we had erroneously on a previous podcast said we'd filled in the Metebelis 3 bingo card. We were wrong. It's referenced here in the Time Warrior. Maybe it's even in some other, like the Invasion of the Dinosaurs. I don't think it is, but who knows? But so I think the randomizer just wants to fill in that bingo card. Really wants the Metebelis 3 out of the way.
And is this the randomizer's first Sontaran choice? Have we seen any Sontarans on our adventure?
Yeah, we did 2 doctors.
We did 2 doctors, of course. I gotta say, seeing the Lynx mask in this, it doesn't get better than this. None of the Sontarans after Lynx look any good compared to this.
Yeah, I think they really nailed it, and they don't shy away from it. They don't put him in rain. They don't put him in shadows. It's really, really good, even for the time, even for now. You know what I mean? Certainly great for the time, but for now, it's like, oh, this holds up. You're like, this is pretty good.
What really makes that mask sing is the little hairs poking out. Really,
yeah.
Now, I don't know if Lynx just didn't shave. Like he'd lost his razor in the crash landing or something, and all the other Sontarans shave. But I really want to see more Sontarans with hair now.
Yeah, maybe we will. But in the meantime, let's find out what happens if they do even better than they are shown to do here, which is the second question: what if the evil plot had succeeded? All right, so there's a few evil plots here, it feels like, right? Yeah. So there's Iron Gron's plot. He just wants to conquer and basically, I guess you could say his short-term plot is to conquer Sir Edward's castle. Yeah. We can talk about that. We can talk about Lynx.
What's he going to do? What's he going to do with Sir Edward's castle once he conquers it?
It's whatever he did to his other castle. He's just going to move in and move all his thugs there, and he'll, drink all the mead and turn all the ladies into serving wenches, maybe worse, and just continue his warlording.
Yeah,
he's basically a land pirate,
I think not on the serving wench front. By the way, dear listener, if you just had dark thoughts creep in there, I think that he would definitely have listened to Lynx's suggestion that they change the inefficient reproductive system of the human race. He'd be experimenting in figuring out how to clone himself. Or maybe he'd farm that one out to Blood Axe. Or maybe with all those scientists that would be left over if the evil plot succeeded. Get to work on the human reproductive system, dogs. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a different story. It's hard because, like, what I try to do with these evil plots succeeding, you go to like the last thing that would have happened. But if you think about Irongon conquering the castle, you have to assume that he doesn't get shied away or scared away by the Doctor's smoke bombs,
Right?
and then they conquer the castle, and they have guns, so he kills the folks there, and maybe the Doctor's either a prisoner or maybe Link stops him and forces the Doctor to fix his ship. But presumably then he wants Lynx to build even more weapons for him, and Irongon becomes ultimately the king of England because of his advanced technology. That's possible.
Possible.
And so maybe what that does, it sort of like alters human history. England becomes a technological powerhouse earlier.
Oh, yeah. What did the Doctor say? We got atomic weapons by the 17th century or something?
Yeah, say that happens. And Britain or England is kind of becomes what the US is in the 20th century. And what does that do? Oh, but but it's on Irongon's values, right? So like it would be more like an empire that is like maybe the dark version, like the mirror universe, you know what I mean? In Star Trek.
Yes.
That's how it happens.
It wouldn't be such a nice empire with Canada in it. It would be Canadian values. No, it would be a nasty empire, nasty Irongon empire, which it kind of was. But yes, if we have nuclear weapons by the 17th century, it's really hard not to see Britain and Spain go to nuclear war with each other.
Oh, yeah.
Over that whole Catholic Protestant thing. So there's a lot of stuff.
That's pretty close, though. I mean, maybe that would be the one that, I don't know. We're getting into very parallel reality, which would be interesting to do if it slides to a reality where Irongon won England. That would be a good little mirror universe in Doctor Who.
The thing is, I could recommend, by the way, a book called it's by David Mitchell, a comedian who just did his first book, Unruly, and it's basically the whole thesis of that book is accurate, which is that pretty much everyone who wrote wore the crown of England, like there were more breaks in the line of succession than we know about. It was all just robber barons, like
right.
Occasionally rebelling against the king and getting a nice hat, and then they were in charge, right? So I don't necessarily see that much change from that. But let's talk about the Lynx thing. If Lynx
let's talk about Lynx's
had
plot.
Succeeded, not much changes because on Earth, at least, the castle blows up. Still,
yeah. I don't know if much changes because he just leaves. Either case, his only goal is to leave the Earth, right? He doesn't even care about it. He sort of claimed it for the Sontaran Empire, but he also says it's not important. It obviously has no resources, nothing that they can use. So does anything change at all if he actually just goes?
Well, you would have to say that you'd have to propose the idea that Lynx is actually some great strategic military genius. And
do I have to?
You may have to for anything to change here. I mean, if he were, let's say he's received some great revelation from his time on Earth, and he's able to win the war against the Rutans just like that. Every single Sontaran story going forth, the Sontarans win because Lynx has brought this superior knowledge. That's what I'm going to suggest.
Well, I would say that if he wins, maybe it's not necessarily he gets to go, but it's that all the scientists get killed. And so if they do, they don't return to Earth, the future, and therefore something results from that. Like, so the scientists actually end up being pretty important.
Well, and how much Doctor Who relies on scientists doing really dumb things and letting things out of their control, I sort of feel like the Doctor might breathe a sigh of relief on that one.
Yes. You got a point. Yeah.
The Pertwee Earth-based Doctor, right, who was dealing with a lot of that a lot of the time.
Well, here's one more possibility. This is not the evil plot, but a different thing that if it didn't happen would have resulted in a different world. Maybe Sarah's speech about not being subservient to men, being more feminist, doesn't happen and doesn't put some ideas in, I forget the name of the head head wench.
Yes, Meg is the one she's talking to.
Meg, and maybe Meg, there's a seed planted here that results in women's liberation centuries later. Who knows?
That would be wonderful, because we are still in a period of Britain where there was a civil war in the 11th, 12th centuries over the question of whether a woman could even accede to the throne. So, we'd get a feminist revolution years ahead of good Queen Bess.
Let's go with that. We'll give Sarah one in her first episode.
Yay.
All right. Speaking of companions affecting things in history, that leads us directly to the third question, which is, where is the Clara Splinter? Clara Oswald, of course, splintered in time at the end of the name of the Doctor. She's somewhere in every single Doctor Who story. Where is she in The Time Warrior?
Well, I think that someone has to have provided the Doctor with the ingredients for his stink bomb.
Oh, okay. You didn't just know it?
Saltpeter. Well, I mean, he not the recipe. I'm sure, as a young man on Gallifrey, plotting how to steal the Lord President's wife, he definitely would have learned. He says, "This is my own special smoking mixture," which would have sounded very different in 1973. But he says it consists of saltpeter. Now, saltpeter was very hard to get in the Middle Ages. Not to mention the materials for gunpowder that Lynx has evidently just whipped up out of nowhere. So someone has got to be here providing these castles.
Oh, that's true.
With saltpeter. So I think that maybe medieval peasant Clara is doing that, and she knows not why. Because, as you say, yes, if it wasn't for the stink bomb, if Iron Gron had simply had the invention we know as a handkerchief, he might have made it through that stink bomb. So yes, it's very important that she also not keep the handkerchief out of Iron Gron's hands as well. But I also think, and this may be the biggest thing for a Clara Splinter to do, and it may once again be Time Lady Clara, because you have to account for the fact that Sarah Jane Smith goes into the TARDIS, does not believe immediately that she's in somewhere weird and has traveled through time. Right? We don't get the Sarah doing the whole bigger on the inside bit. So, has Time Lady Clara transformed the opening of the TARDIS area into just like looking like a police box? Well, no, because Sarah Jane comes out of it and says, "Oh, it's still a police box." By the way, she goes looking for a telephone and totally ignores the instructions on the door of the TARDIS.
Right.
To get the telephone. Pull to open, Sarah. Pull to open. But she says it's still a police box. I think that Clara is inside there. She's set it up as like a little nightclub. And she welcomes Sarah in. They get a little drunk. That's why Sarah thinks, oh, this must be students doing a Rag Week thing. Which is what she says. By the way, is Rag Week known in the US, North America in general?
You're not talking about Retrieval Augmented Generation Week, are you?
No, I'm not. It's a traditional British student thing where you raise money for charity by doing a week of very silly things.
Okay. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. So that's what she's done. She's created a nightclub. She's gotten Sarah a little bit squiffy so that she doesn't realize that she's in medieval England. And that the whole plot can unfold as it must.
Squiffy.
Also from Blackadder, a word for a little bit drunk.
I kind of gathered that, but it stopped me. So that makes a lot of sense. I actually like that as sort of explaining away her not having that scene, because I think that is a sadly, Sarah Jane, our favorite companion, did not get the oh my goodness, scene of like, what is this thing I've just walked into?
Because the BBC was so cheap, we couldn't even have the TARDIS console set.
Yeah.
By the way, medieval costumes also very cheap if you're the BBC, because they were doing costume dramas all the time at this point. So anyway.
Yeah, my only thing is that no one ever tells the serving wenches to go, like to run out of the castle.
Yes.
And oh my God, those poor wenches. I like to think Sarah was one of them. Sarah got the heads up. Sarah was keeping a closer eye on things and just wanted to make sure nobody got hurt. when
Clara,
Links took off. Sorry, Clara, yeah. Not
yes.
Clara.
Yes.
So yeah, that's my thing.
Yeah, she's also maybe the person who designed those little cubicles in the where Unit has stashed all the scientists.
Oh yeah,
where there's like no ceiling, and they're talking about people after they've gone through those doors.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing. Like they're right there. Like this is one room.
Maybe she somehow soundproofed those cubicles so that people can talk smack. That basically Rubeish can talk smack about Sarah Jane.
Well, the sonic screwdrivers, they're involved.
Mm-hmm.
They're sonic,
Yeah, sonic, yes, it creates a zone of silence.
All right. Well, guys, it is time for the final question, but not before we also tell you about where you can interact with us online. And one of those places is at pull2open.net, where you could subscribe to our newsletter, where you get full notes on all of our random episodes that we talk about. There's always stuff we don't get to, so there's fresh content there. You can also follow us on social. We're at pull2open on TikTok and on Blue Sky, and at pull2open63 on most other networks, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm sure there's one I'm forgetting there. Threads, yes, that's the one. Most of them are owned by Facebook or Meta. But we're on all of them. And there is where you can interact with the show and tell us how we are brilliant or totally wrong on the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for the Time Warrior. What did we think of this story? Pull to Open rating system has 7 ratings. There's the Dalek, which is what we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to an irredeemably bad episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which is what we give to an episode that's not that good, but hey, at least they tried something. The Viscount Banger, which is reserved for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a show beyond rating, usually for reasons of nostalgia. The Lady Cassandra, which is a paper-thin plot, but hey, at least it looks good, especially with a little moisturizing. And the Zarbi, a script that is so bad, it's good.
Well, I'm starting to kind of kick myself that we didn't when we did the whole Pull to Open poll on Twitter. Go check us out there, where we asked what the name of the Zarbi so bad it's good rating should be. I'm kind of kicking myself that we didn't include Professor Rubeish.
Professor Rubeish
as an option. Because there is definitely a sense in which this is a load of Rubeish. But no, it's Zarbi it is.
Zarbi, really?
Well, a half Zarbi. No, Zarbi is the name of the...
Oh, you're hybriding this.
I am hybriding it. It's not a Viscount Banger. I think that's the next castle over. I think this particular castle is a Dalek Zarbi hybrid. I think
Dalek Zarbi hybrid.
Yeah.
Interesting.
On one side, it's solid Doctor Who, and on the other side, there's just so much of this kind of Blackadder stuff of the just everything's so cheap and the stink bomb and the ladders and the what it definitely falls into that sort of everything's just there to laugh at. So that seems pretty Zarbi-ish to me. So I think Holmes is kind of coasting right on that line between Dalek and Zarbi here, as he often would.
Well, I'm going to step over that line, or rather commit to one side of it. I think this is a very solid Dalek. I think I see what you're saying with all of the laughs and stuff, but I feel it's very knowing. I feel like it knows what it's doing. It's doing it confidently. It's not sort of an accident. So I think this is a great story. I almost made it a banger, honestly. Like, I was thinking in the first 2 or 3 episodes, I was having such a good time admiring this script that I thought, is this a hidden gem? Is this going to be one of the best episodes? And then it sort of peters out. Like I was saying, it's sort of like, oh yeah, that kind of runs out of energy. It's getting repetitious.
Kind of
it's not
peters out.
And there's a few things I could have picked out even more. Like there's the thing with Lynx's gun, which does like 10 different things. It hypnotizes people.
Yes.
It stuns people. It lights things on fire. It knocks weapons out of people's hands. And you have to hold down the button apparently to kill someone, because the cliffhanger to episode 3 is that the Doctor gets shot with it, but he does not die because he didn't get the blast long enough, which I always sort of go, wait a minute, on energy weapons, where I'm just like, I hate it when they depict energy weapons as less effective than firearms. And when they are, it's like, what are you doing? Isn't the whole point of doing a next generation of weapon that it is actually more effective? Because what else? What's the point of having an energy weapon if a shotgun would have killed him then and there? So that doesn't make sense to me. Again, I get tripped up on these things, but I feel like it's a cheat as a cliffhanger then, because
Totally.
you want to have the cliffhanger where you pull the trigger and it happens, but then that creates a problem, and this is a cop out, the thing that he didn't just hold it down long enough.
Yeah, see, there are a few things like that make me lean at least 50% towards Zabi. One of them, thank you for just reminding me, we didn't even mention it. The key to unlocking the scientists out of their hypnosis is to do a poker rhythm with the...
Well, there was some kind of like pattern you had to zap their eyes with, right? Which is like, that's fine. That works.
Are Sontarans fans of the poker? Like, I don't think it's why it's a poker rhythm. But anyway,
something pretty close, shall we say?
But also, like, I mean, come on, So we've said that the quote unquote women's lib stuff has not aged well. Like, Rubeish, for all his charm, is kind of a misogynistic asshole. More so in the original script, by the way, where they pulled out a line that he had about how women's brains were almost as good as men's. But he's basically saying that here. The Doctor is also kind of saying it. The Doctor is briefly sexist with the whole thing about make the coffee. Which
I don't think Rubeish hates anything. Like I think you're starting to use misogynist and sexist interchangeably. I think he might be arguably sexist. I mean, Rubeish is just such a sunny guy. In fact,
he believes Sarah's a spy. Like he's not.
Yeah, it could be. Like Sarah thought the Doctor was a spy.
Yeah, but she didn't try to dob him in to the brig.
I thought Rubeish was great. He was actually Grace's favorite character.
Oh yeah, I mean he's charming. It's kind of that whole Moffat talks about Matt Smith versus Capaldi, right? Matt Smith could say the darkest thing and he's still charming. Capaldi could say the sweetest thing and he's still terrifying, right? It's all about the actor playing Rubeish here, who is wonderful. I'm so glad that I finally, by the way, have the reason why the back page of Doctor Who magazine always had that section, "What a load of Rubeish." Just enough things like that for me that tilted over into 50% Zabi territory here. But I love that because I think that's very Bob Holmes. Like, I think there's so much veneration of Bob Holmes in Doctor Who fandom, and I think we forget the guy just loved comedy. He just loved laughs. He loved doing it, to the point of almost being stupid. Like, there's a joke about the fart smell of the stink bomb in this. We didn't even have to get to the to New Who and World War III and Aliens of London to get the fart jokes into Doctor Who. They were already there.
Yeah.
Thanks to Bob Holmes.
No.
Yeah,
a little bit. But I think that's not, again, if he's doing it knowingly and he's doing it in a way that is, I think, showing his skill. I don't think that it's not bad to me. It's not bad. But people have different tastes. All right, let's compare what we're tasting in our tasting vessel. I don't know where that's going. But the point is, we need to flee away from this adventure, regardless of what our departure will do to it. And we have to find out where we're going next by activating the randomizer.
Yes, step into the TARDIS. It's disguised as a wine tasting. So that
there we go. Craft beer tasting. Let's go with that.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I'm going in to follow that sign, but oh no, what's happening? We're in the randomizer. The randomizer, full pull to open, has two components. Pete's sitting in the controls of the first. That's the Codex. It's the list of all Doctor Who stories in non-random order, which would not break your primitive Earth brains if you saw it. You can, in fact, go see it. Go see where we put all the emoji titles in there. But that also tells us how many stories we have to visit on our interminable quest before we return to our Sontaran masters. Pete, what is the magic number?
That number is now 182.
182, Sontar. Ha!
We somehow got this far without saying Sontar, huh?
We did, which they don't in the original, right?
They did not.
New Who thing?
That's a new thing.
So, yeah, we didn't really get around to talking about the Sontarans much, and I guess we will have many opportunities to do that in the future. Maybe even after I hit the Executor, which is random.org, which is true randomness. It is bespoke randomness. It relies on atmospheric noise and delta particles in the atmosphere from Sontarans fleeing in time and galactic ticket inspectors chasing after them. Instead of using a algorithm to choose random numbers, not a ralgorithm, that's something that the Rutans use. But anyway, before I hit the generate button and get a random number between 1 and 182, we like to issue some challenges to the randomizer, and I guess I've already done mine. More Sontarans.
There you go.
Bring us a fix with Sontarans. No, you can't literally do that, but that was the Jim will fix it thing that we don't talk about anymore. But yeah, another Sontaran story. Pete, what about you?
Well, we talked about Liz Sladen's first adventure and it being a neat way to use that opportunity. I would love to see another introduction of a sword. It doesn't necessarily have to be a companion, but maybe a recurring character and the beginning of a relationship that the Doctor has with someone or something. That's what I would like to see.
You know that we've not asked the randomizer for another Con Medieval story.
Well, that's right.
There are many. So maybe it's going to choose that. But I'm not going to prejudice the randomizer. I'm simply going to ask you, Pete, for a countdown in full Sontaran style before I hit the generate button.
All right, here we go. We want the result of this countdown in 4, 3, 2, 1. Doctor Who.
3!
No.
3! Yes!
Impossible.
Possible!
You know what it is.
It's got to be inside the spaceship Edge of Destruction.
That is exactly it.
Yes!
It's Edge of Destruction.
Yes.
Quick one. That's a 2-episoder.
Yep. It's the introduction of something, sort of.
It's the introduction of the TARDIS only episode.
That's the introduction of the bottle episode.
Yeah, I suppose.
Wow.
Not bad. Wild. Wow.
And I was going to say that there is a randomizer connection already. William Russell played kind of medieval characters.
Right? Oh, okay.
Before he became
true.
Question. So yes, the randomizer is following his lead.
All right. Well, we will be following the TARDIS to some place where it is in grave danger, apparently, next time when you tune in to Pull to Open, which is a podcast. Yes, podcasts are things that are great to listen to. They're great things to subscribe to. They're great things to follow. But the best thing you can do with a podcast is, if you enjoy it, share it with a friend. So please do if you do. Thank you very much, Martin West, for your music. As always, it's always rocking. And hey, follow us online and tell us all about yourself and what you thought of the Time Warrior. I think we forgot to tell people to scroll up on Spotify and give us your vote on what you thought of it.
Yes,
so do that.
All to open. Go do that. We will see you next time for the Edge of Destruction. And if you are mad at us, please do not attack anyone with a pair of scissors. We'll see you then.
Sontarans.